with virtual and in-person participation by members of the public, staff, and council. This meeting is also being live streamed and may be viewed online at ajax.ca/live. A friendly reminder to all participants to please use the microphone. Sorry about that. To please use the microphone at all times for the benefit of those participating in council chambers and joining remotely. To those making submissions as part of a public meeting, please ensure you sign in using the sheet available at the accessibility podium to preserve rights available to you under the Planning Act and/or applicable legislation. I now call this meeting to order. And for those of you in the audience, it's the table right there in the front. Please make sure you sign in there before going to the podium. Once you hit the microphone, your time begins. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territories of the Mississaugas. More specifically, the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nations, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action and acknowledging the United Nations Declaration of Rights and Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep those principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. So I will ask at this time, is there any interest, is there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, so seeing none, moving on to the adoption of the minutes. And we have Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford and Regional Councillor Joanne Dyes as the seconder for that. And the resolution that the meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee being held on September 3rd be adopted. Can we have a vote on that? And sorry, there's no comments or questions, correct, for that? Okay, so if we can have a vote on that, please, colleagues. Thank you. And that passes. All right, we're going to go into the public meeting portion. I now call upon Director Romanowski to introduce item 4.1, Zoning Our Future Town of Ajax Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw Review. And this is our statutory public meeting and consultation update. Director?
Thank you, Chair Henry. I'll turn it over to our planning department to provide their presentation. We have Sandra McElhaney that'll give the presentation this afternoon.
Excellent, thank you.
How's the volume for this? Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of committee. I'm Sandra McElhaney, a senior planner with the town. The purpose of this presentation is to provide a summary of the consultation and engagement work completed as part of the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw review. The presentation will be followed by a question and answer period and statutory public meeting as required by the Planning Act. Members of the community and stakeholders are encouraged to provide their oral comments. Written comments received following issuance of the notice have already been provided to you. Today's presentation will include the following. We'll present a brief background on the project, an overview of the consultation events which took place this summer. You'll hear about our online engagement work in a summary format, and comments, what we heard from members of the community. We'll give you a brief update on the Indigenous consultation work, some brief slide on council questions. This was from June 17th questions, and concluding with some next steps. To recap, phase 1 of our Zoning Our Future project began in 2015 with the release of 8 themes-based discussion papers. Following a variety of issues that delayed the project, staff were able to complete and present 8 technical reports and a draft proposed zoning bylaw at the June 17th GGC meeting. These documents were then released for public and stakeholder review via the project's IMO webpage, effectively kicking off a 3-month engagement period, ending on September 16th. In addition, a proposed official plan amendment has been included with the staff report today to implement council's goal of up to 4 units on all residential lots. Staff held 4 open house events, 3 were in person and 1 virtual. The team felt that the open house meetings were well received, with the largest turnouts at the beginning and then again at the end of the summer. Not shown on the graphic, but alongside the formal meetings, staff attended Trailfest back in June and several Thursday Ajax markets at the ACC throughout the summer months. The goal was really to promote participation by providing postcards to the community about the upcoming open house events in an informal setting. It's worth noting, but not shown on the slide here, that the web page metrics indicate a bump in online viewings after these impromptu activities. In addition, targeted agency and building industry meetings were also well attended, with opportunities to ask staff questions. Staff also had other one-to-one meetings with landowners and their agents to discuss issues prior to them submitting their formal comments. We do anticipate having more follow-up discussions with stakeholders and as we address the comments over the coming months. Here's what the IMO website metrics look like. 1,800 overall visits represents, we feel, a significant amount of web traffic. And you can see here by some of the other numbers that we did have a good digital footprint via the project webpage. So in terms of formal comments, we actually heard from 37 individuals or agencies by the mid-September deadline, with some additional comments coming in slowly after that time. For the purposes of this presentation, we've summarized the comments into themes, which don't necessarily align with one individual or group, nor are these in any particular order. The top issues were parking. Some felt the proposed zoning bylaw rates for parking were too high and might impact the construction of new homes. Others felt, not surprising, we need more parking. Home sizes, centered primarily around rebuilds in predominantly low-rise neighborhoods. This theme really gives us the sense that many feel these replacement homes are just too big or too tall. And finally, lots of discussion on additional dwelling units or ADUs. Some were positive, some expressed concern. The latter was often tied in with inadequate parking, could be privacy, or concerns related to emergency services accessing these units, as an example. In addition to the summary themes, we've presented some actual comments from a variety of community members and other stakeholders. Keep in mind that these are not necessarily site-specific and, again, are presented in no particular order. I think many touch on more than one of the technical report themes, not uncommon, such as intensification areas and Pickering Village, as an example. Finally, please note that the more detailed comments are indeed outlined in the staff report today. Staff also worked with the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, or MSIFN, and their engagement team known as Minogi. MSIFN is a signatory, as mentioned earlier, of the Williams Treaties First Nations. Staff worked closely with MSIFN MSIFN to implement a capacity funding agreement, the first of its kind for the town. The agreement would empower the MSIFN engagement team to review the reports and the draft bylaw itself and provide the town with traditional knowledge and/or other planning input. With this agreement now in place, staff have received feedback on the intensification areas, Greenlands, and sustainability technical reports. So the comments were both supportive and also provided some recommendations for improvement. And the next step on this front is to review the comments in detail and conduct any follow-up discussions as needed. At the June 17th GGC meeting, Council had the following questions for staff. We do present the questions here, but we'd like you to refer to the report for the detailed responses just to keep things concise. So what's happening next? Moving forward, staff will continue to review all of the comments received from Council, residents, and stakeholders, and refine and update the draft zoning bylaw. Part of that process will be to follow up with individual meetings, depending on the comment and agency as needed. And a final listing of all the comments received and the responses on how these have been addressed will also be released with the final bylaw and report. And this work will take place over the coming months with the goal of presenting a final draft to committee early in the new year. I thank you for your attention. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Madam Chair, for the public meeting component. Staff are also happy to answer any questions from Council, which can be directed through Sean. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, much appreciated. Oh, wrong, sorry, one moment. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair Henry. I did actually have questions based on the report. Sorry, not the presentation. So should I bring that now or should I wait? I'll wait. Thank you.
Sorry, after.
Thank you.
Thank
My
you.
mistake.
So at this time, I'll open up the public meeting portion of today's meeting and invite any member of the public who are present and interested in speaking to the matter to come to the accessibility podium, sign in using the sign-in sheet. Please remember that once you hit the mic button, your time starts. And I believe our first presenter is representing a large group of people, correct? So I believe you've been granted a 10-minute time slot. All right, anytime you want to start.
And I'm speaking on behalf of a group of residents in that neighborhood who are highly concerned about recent development within our neighborhood. And given the townwide zoning review, we'd like to elevate our concerns to you. Before I begin, some personal history. Both of my grandparents came to what we now call Ajax to work at DIL, Defence Industries Limited, the largest ammunitions plant in the British Commonwealth in World War II. Both of my grandmothers, Peggy and Em, were bomb girls. One grandfather, Cecil, a World War I vet, and Ray Henshaw, my other grandfather, was the plant's fire inspector, who also served as an Ajax town councillor, remembered for his service by a plaque and a tree planted at our lakefront. When the war was over, both families stayed and raised their families in the wartime housing. My parents grew up living side by side at 17 and 19 George Street. They married and bought a house in Neighborhood 1. I grew up there along with my sister, and I now live in that house that's on the, oh, wrong one, on the screen. Okay. We are now way ahead. Sorry, guys. There we go. One in the middle. That is my home, so I come to this meeting with deep roots that extend before the town was incorporated, and I have a vested interest, as do all those that I represent in our town and our neighborhood. Neighborhood 1 is zoned R1B. The Strong Neighborhoods Technical Report says if the applicable zoning does not accurately reflect the character of these neighborhoods, new development is likely to appear out of context and may directly diminish the unified character of the area. We can attest to that. New development is absolutely out of character, and current zoning is insufficient for preserving that character of our historical neighborhood. Now let's address why it's historical and the character so important. DIL was built and operated on this land from 1941 to 1945. Following the war, the land was eventually turned over to Central Mortgage and Housing Corporation, who cleared dormitories and other buildings to make way for a new subdivision, Neighborhood 1, the characteristics of which are historically noteworthy. From a Queen's University School of Urban and Regional Planning report titled How the Central Mortgage and Housing Corporation Influenced Suburban Community Planning and Design in Post-World War II Canada, CMHC discouraged the traditional grid layout of streets and promoted a unit concept, which included a central commercial institutional area within walking distance of the surrounding residential area, while routing through traffic onto arterial streets along the periphery. CMHC changed the Canadian landscape with suburban communities that demonstrated the principles we see in Neighborhood 1. Curvilinear street design concept that, as the technical report states, showcases mid-century planning principles, which include large lots, winding streets, and a network of interconnected neighborhood parks, unique characteristics that distinguish them from other neighborhoods. Central Mortgage and Housing designed and planned hundreds of neighborhoods in over 200 communities across Canada, and our neighborhood, Neighborhood 1, is the first planned neighborhood in all of Canada. The first of its kind, not only in our town, but in our country. Its historic significance extends nationally. In Ajax, we commemorate our distinguished history, how our town came to be, with a large lakefront memorial, streets and parks named to honor and remember men and women who have served, and in our Neighborhood 1, plaques honoring the location of our town's beginnings, and inform that our neighborhood importantly included the site of the women's residences for nearly 9,000 women who worked in our war plant. We continue to honor our history with recent and ongoing installations. Right now, we see banners are hung on Harwood to honor those who have served. Mayor, I believe your service was honored with such a banner. And in Pat Bailey Square, a new gathering place in our town, a memorial to our bomb girls from World War II, demonstrating that remembering our unique and significant history is as important now as ever. We remember that we are a community of people who have come together from our very inception to work together towards our common good. Neighborhood 1 is a foundational piece of that story. Now, to speak directly to the assessment made in our town planner's Strong Neighborhoods Technical Report, it acknowledges the character of our neighborhood and indicates there are ways to revise zoning to preserve that. But the challenge here is that the current regulatory trends are making redevelopment in established neighborhoods more permissive in order to accommodate multiple family dwellings. But with our current zoning, here's how we're seeing it play out in Neighborhood 1. In this house, a middle-aged couple lives here. In this one, a couple with one child. And in this one, 2 senior citizens. Whereas in these 3 homes, in the same vicinity as the previous photos, multiple family dwellings exist. And these are but a few of such smaller scale multiple family homes that exist in our neighborhood. Beyond the lack of density, these large builds create multiple negatives for surrounding neighbors. These houses loom over houses on all sides, and any privacy neighbors enjoy is now gone. In this case, 10 neighbors lost their privacy. And the next door neighbor cannot open his passenger side door of his vehicle without stepping onto his neighbor's property. He had to implore them not to extend the fence down the driveway side. Mature trees are taken down to create the excessive footprint required. Neighbors lose their access to sunlight and complain about drainage from the monster homes due to the proximity to their property. Deeply upsetting. Currently, there is a town initiative called SNAP. We received a letter from you, Mayor, regarding this. Sustainable Neighbors Action Program to, in part, advance climate action in older urban areas. Losing your access to sunlight disallows drying your laundry outside, growing a vegetable garden, supporting trees, even solar panel installation depending on the new build size and location. Climate action is an initiative we should be prioritizing. 2 more examples that show gentle intensification is achievable with smaller builds than the recent excessively large ones. So with that awareness, we feel that zoning changes to assure retention of the character of our legacy neighborhood are not only doable, but justified, given our singular place in national development and suburban neighborhood design and the town's ongoing honoring of our history. So how do we accomplish this while understanding the move to intensify? Well, we believe a collaborative approach between the town, planners, and stakeholders can both answer requirements, protect and grow, elicit a new zoning plan or heritage designation for our neighborhood. But we need to look into this. Now, you may say we had community engagement meetings, but the truth is most people didn't know about them. There were no big signs posted throughout town as we do with other notable events, camp deadlines, truth and reconciliation, etc. We're determining how our town grows, how we experience our town. And we believe if we're serious about community engagement, this proposed consultative approach is the next step regarding Neighborhood 1. And an example of where this consultative process works successfully is Edmonton's historic Westmount neighborhood. From an article about it, it requires all parties to enter the process with the idea that it is a conversation and that achieving a solution requires compromise on everyone's part. The neighborhood has new zoning, that all new construction and major renovations of heritage homes in this area must conform to the neighborhood's traditional character. And at the same time, the revised zoning policy allows for additional suites. They just have to fit in, architecturally speaking. From our own Strong Neighborhoods technical report, there are many ways that the zoning of legacy neighborhoods could be revised to better preserve existing neighborhood character. In most cases, this would involve tightening restrictions on development standards, such as requiring larger setbacks from lot lines, restricting the percentage of a property that could be covered by buildings, and significantly reducing the maximum height of new homes. Allow for renovations, but those that fit into our legacy neighborhood. This is our preferred way forward to protect Neighborhood 1's place in Ajax's and Canada's history, and what a wonderful achievement that would be for all our legacies. It's an honorable thing, and we strongly feel the right thing to do, because once history is gone, it's gone forever.
Thank you for your time. Do we have any questions? Not comments, just questions for our presenter? We do. Thank you. Councillor Bauer, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Henry. Thank you so much, Mrs. Middleton, for coming to today's meeting and for your excellent, well-researched presentation. I appreciate it. This is not pecuniary interest disclosure, but these are my neighbors. Those pictures are from where I walk every day and some on my street. So I know how passionate you and our neighbors have been about this discussion. We've had many discussions about it. And I believe you had some conversations with Mr. Sawchuk from planning about heritage designations. And you did mention about maybe a heritage designation for Neighborhood 1. So my question would be to you, and maybe follow up to Mr. Sawchuk. What did you learn, or what are the conversations that happened about that?
With Mr. Sawchuk directly, or conversations with the neighbors as well? All
However
of it?
you would like, whatever information you'd like to share.
I think, well, if I walk the neighborhood like you do daily, so I think the feedback from neighbors would be 99% that they're extremely concerned by these houses and don't see that they fit. They do understand the push for density, though. So I think from our conversations, what was very illuminating to me, because most people kind of immediately say no when they think of a heritage designation.
Right.
But these conversations were illuminating and made me find out in a very limited way, we didn't get into a lot of depth, but that there's a lot more flexibility and perhaps it is a workable solution. I think ultimately what I was hoping to do in terms of representing multiple people that all have similar but yet some differing ideas about how to move forward is that we were hoping, and it sounded like this was part of what was presented just before me, that a further conversation regarding our neighborhood was possible, so that we could find out what may be possible, whether in terms of zoning, instead of just stamping what's there, which obviously is allowing for these very large homes. Are there tweaks to that that could happen that answer everybody's need for something that stays within, height was one of the things that was mentioned, more manageable height that doesn't encroach on people so much, so they're not losing privacy, they're not losing sunlight, that sort of thing. But also enables us to maintain a level of character for this neighborhood, which in all our opinions is incredibly significant. And I know it's a challenge, because I know we're looking for a lot of housing. We see the developments and the rezoning and all the rest of it happening quite immediately to us. But I think that's ultimately our biggest hope right now in this moment, is that the next step would allow stakeholders to get together and have fulsome conversations that understand what is actually feasible. And then also, you know, when you talk to a lot of people, you get a lot of great ideas that sometimes you don't come to yourself right away.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. And Mr. Sawchuk, can I ask you now, is that something that could be arranged?
So through the chair to Councillor Bauer, absolutely. So in my discussions with Ms. Middleton, we discussed the opportunity to speak about the framework for Heritage Conservation District to get a better sense of what the community is looking for and what a tool like that could present. One of the benefits to that type of tool over zoning is that it truly can help control the character of redevelopment. So when we look at zoning mechanisms, we look largely at quantifiable standards. So, you know, we could look at lowering height, for example, but that's not going to stop someone from being able to come in and build something that's entirely out of character with the neighborhood. A Heritage Conservation District could. So they are different tools. I believe they can accomplish different results, but that is absolutely something that we'd be willing to enter into discussions with the community about.
Okay, thank you very much. So,
Sorry, Madam Chair, if I may just jump
Yep.
in there.
Sean, hi, Mr. McCullough, thank you.
If that was something that council desired, we would be looking for direction from council,
Yes.
because there would be a very large process
Okay.
and resources needed to look into something like that. And we'd have to kind of first start the conversation, but then plan out what that looks like. Because I do note this was something that was examined, and this neighborhood was asked if that was something they were interested in around 2010, maybe a few years earlier than that.
Right.
And at that time, the results were a resounding no, but it may have just been a misunderstanding of what that tool could look like. So certainly we would need council's direction on that.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for reminding me about that, because you're right. When you use the phrase heritage designation, everybody kind of goes, no way, back it up. But my understanding is that they can be a lot, there can be some very flexible lines determined there, so with that tool. So I do have a couple of amendments that I was going to bring forth, which I think now is not the time, but I will bring that up at that time. And thank you very much for your presentation. I don't have any other questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. We do have further questions. Mayor Collier?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Middleton, and thank you for your presentation. I don't know if you're aware, but this is not just your neighborhood.
Pardon me?
I said, I don't know if you're aware, but this is not just your neighborhood. This type of development or redevelopment, gentrification, whatever you want to call it, is happening in many neighborhoods. Like where I live, I'll refer to as maybe neighborhood 2. I don't know. Just a little further south down by the lake. There's many houses on the street that have been taken down and rebuilt into larger homes that are there already. And I mean, that is their right as homeowners to do. It's not, we have small homes on big lots in certain areas in town. And that is attractive to people that want to come and redevelop. Are you aware? I mean, it's not just neighborhood
Absolutely,
one.
I'm aware. No,
Okay.
absolutely, I'm aware, which is why I was trying to leverage the presentation on, first of all, the historic nature of our neighborhood, which is different than neighborhoods that are south to us, right, in terms of
Well,
our
or north.
town
The other
history.
side of the 401 is a similar neighborhood.
Pardon me?
The other side of the 401 is a similar neighborhood.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm living in neighborhood 1, so I'm
Okay.
discussing that. And I am aware that that's happening. I'm not just in our town, but that's why I'm trying to make it specific about the history of our town. Our location is very specific to the history of our town. And as I was trying, and maybe I didn't make it clear enough, I'm not saying that we don't expect that there's going to be intensification or larger builds than the original homes, which I don't have on the picture there. Most of these ones here, I know it's hard to see because it's a little bit far away, but most of them have all been amended, renovated in one fashion or another. But what we're trying to say is that with the current zoning, which has existed for a long time, we've seen very different new builds in the last couple of years. I think there's 6, maybe 7 in that entire neighborhood, which, as you saw in the one picture, literally dwarf other homes, even homes that have mansard roofs, extensions onto the back, garages, and people have drainage issues and very significant things. So I think what we're saying is, I hope we're saying, is that we understand that there is a need, not just a push for density and intensification, but we're hoping that we can massage that a little bit in our neighborhood that not only allows it, but respects the history of our neighborhood. And also the fact that people would still like to have sun, still like to be able to have a bit of privacy, you know. At this point, I can't give you the exact specifics to say the or the rules right now say I think it's 11 meters in height as the max height. I can't say to you, Mayor, oh, that should be 8, or that should, you know, that's the conversation to have. If proportionately a follow-up meeting with stakeholders, there's a resounding comments that are all sort of specifying something like, say, the height issue, then you look at that and you figure how you can handle that. I don't think anybody is saying that they don't see intensification happening everywhere. We're quite aware of that.
Fair enough. So my next question is, what would you see us as council do? Because again, we do something specific for your neighborhood. But there's 36,000+ homes in Ajax. And the next thing you know, we have another delegation next week off of Gregory Road, down where I am, asking for the same thing. And then we have, you know, the people north of the 401 asking for the same thing. Where I'm going with this is, we often hear from people who don't want to see change, but the reality is we have change. Some of it is forced on us by the provincial government, but I don't think it's reasonable to be asking this council to be making an exception for one group. There is an option perhaps for a heritage designation, but that brings with it a number of other restrictions that some of your neighbors, I think you need a percentage to buy in. I think there are planning restrictions for people that want to develop. And you did say, Mr. Sawchuk, they did try it before and it was turned down, or was that Mr. McCullough? So it's an interesting balance. That's all I'm trying to say is it's very difficult to try and do something for one neighborhood.
I completely understand that.
Okay.
I completely understand that. And I think we all are wide-eyed in that regard. We know that. We can't dismiss the fact that we're a historical neighborhood, which just going through the neighborhood, you see that it's very different than where you're living. My sister lives down there, right?
Yep.
There are very different characteristics. And the fact that a lot of the characteristics that are so popular in a neighborhood like that are the ones we see higher up in Ward 2, kind of all leverage on the fact they were developed here, where we took a different direction before anybody else did in the entire country. So I understand it's difficult to say to one, you can't have exactly what this one does, but we do have something that's singular and different. And we aren't saying that we don't see things intensifying, we don't see things changing. We're seeing them change all the time. We have, which maybe I should have included, there was another house that just recently was taken down, actually 2, very close to us. And they were put up very differently, but within a different scale. Even that fits in better than the pictures that I showed you, which are the most extreme elements of what we're seeing in our neighborhood.
I did notice the one with the yellow garage, you said the gentleman couldn't open the door. His garage was built right up to the property line.
Yeah.
Where the old house would have been. So it doesn't look like there's a lot of consideration given for the neighbor there back then. But you're always going to get those exceptions.
Yes.
So just so I understand, your ask specifically is that we consider either a heritage designation for the area or maximum height restrictions and minimum setbacks.
I think if I'm to speak accurately on behalf of everybody, yes, but I would say, we know that this has been ongoing for a very long time and have been held up for whatever reason, COVID and those sorts of things, so no one's asking for like years-long investigation into this. We're talking about, could we
That's what it
have?
would be.
Okay, well, what we
Yeah.
were, this is what we're proposing, though, you're asking, is that we at least can make sure that the neighborhood knows. My intention was, Mayor, to go around after the August 8 meeting, I think when I talked to Mr. McCullough, to go around the neighborhood and, get everybody aware, put some pamphlets out myself. Unfortunately, we had a death in the family and weren't able to do that. So realistically, just get everybody aware. So maybe they could have a meeting where, similar to what I was talking to about a heritage designation, we get into the real weeds of that, the real details of that. Because I will say, I think my first assumption about a heritage designation, which I would believe most people would be, is thinking, oh, your property value is going to go down, no one's going to want to buy in the neighborhood, there's going to be so much red tape to doing anything in your house. Is that true? I think, given the significance of our neighborhood, it behooves us to find out. And if it requires a meeting for the neighbors to get together and really be able to go into detail on that and find out, and then go, okay, yes, no. And if it's no, to your point, then come back and say, can we at least claw back the height a little bit, right? Can we even look at setbacks?
But you're
and,
sort of contradicting yourself there, and this is kind of what I'm saying.
right,
My next question would be, well,
Right.
first, how many people do you represent here today?
today.
The people who are here, or?
Because of what I said, where I couldn't get around the neighborhood, the formal list was 20 people, myself included.
Okay.
It would have been much larger if I had been able to do what I
I
wanted.
believe that looking into a heritage neighborhood potentially can be done separately from this. This can still go ahead today, and that can happen at the same time concurrently. But you're saying if that you get the whole group together and we have this meeting and we discuss a heritage designation and it's a resounding no, which I'm guessing it will be from experience, no disrespect,
Right.
you would be able to accept that, like that, because no disrespect, you're one person representing 20 people. If we get
Absolutely.
the whole group together and they say, no, we want it left like this,
I completely
you're
understand.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have more questions. So Councillor Dyes, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Middleton, for our presentation today and for everybody attending the meeting, which is very important to you, I know. And I just wanted to ask, I believe you were at the SNAP meeting, the last one they had, and talking about, and you presented some of that today, maybe you could go over again, how the initiatives that we're trying to promote through the SNAP project environmentally is a problem when you're building homes that overpower all of, the property where you can't grow something. And you had mentioned some of those challenges.
Yeah, it's from neighbors who live adjacent to these or around them. Depending on the size, obviously the direction where they're located and the sun coming, they have issues down their backyard where they either have a lot more shade, which then negates what they were previously able to do. I know a specific neighbor who lives on the corner of Wishbone and Bircher, who has a lot of problems with drainage, which is impeding things in her backyard too, from the house that's right beside. Again, these are all things that are issues people are bringing to me when I walk around the neighborhood and they talk about the impacts that they have directly.
And I appreciate that because we're always promoting the protection of trees and actually planting more trees. And I know that's one of the initiatives through this project, which, no doubt was chosen also because you have a very cohesive community and a very different community that also allows us that room to do some of that work. So that's another aspect of, I think, why, coming forward with your concerns today is very important in keeping that neighborhood as intact as possible and reasonable about your asks. So I just wanted to mention that part of it, the environmental part of it too, and the same concerns were brought up with respect to drainage on these properties that now flow into other properties, which is always sort of taken for granted. We think we've put in everything to mitigate that, but it doesn't always work. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. We do lose a lot of trees. One of the homes, I think it was the home that the mayor was just talking about, where he could see the garage beside the larger build, that home, positionally, the street starts to crescent around. And there are easily 10 homes there that lost any vestige of privacy, not only because of the height, but because when the build was completed and done, there were 2 very mature trees at the very back of the yard that were nowhere near the house, and then they took them down at the very end. So all those neighbors were impacted in a variety of ways.
Thank you. We have Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question, thank you for your presentation. My question is to staff around heritage designation. If you live in a neighborhood that's heritage designated, does that take away the ability for someone who's buying a house to apply for a minor variance, let's say for height or, distance from the setback? I'm only asking because I do read the minor variances things, and I just wondered if the heritage designation stops that.
Sure. So through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford, heritage designation wouldn't stop that. Specifically in this context, we'd be looking at a heritage conservation district, which comes along with its own plan. And that plan would include some measures that probably relate to things that are typically controlled by zoning. It might be height, it might be setbacks. There could be reference to those things through the Heritage Conservation District Plan. But in that case, a heritage permit would have to be applied for, and staff, either through staff or through council, would be able to approve that from the heritage standpoint. And then if it's still conflicted with what was in the zoning bylaw, there could be a minor variance process that plays out as it typically would in any other neighborhood.
Okay, I just wanted you to realize that before you go into that kind of next step, that there is that other area that can be accessed through minor variance. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. We now have Regional Councillor Sterling Lee.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Very much appreciated. You made a comment regarding you weren't aware of like the process, like you made a comment like from a communication standpoint, the town kind of failed in terms of letting you know about the process around that. I was just wondering, from our staff point of view, what was our communications strategy? I think, yeah.
So through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee, so we included a robust consultation process. Now, we do recognize that most of that was online in the absence of the newspaper, because we do recognize there are a lot of community members that still review the newspaper. So that's why we had the added steps of attending in-person events, promoting it through the delivery of postcards at our facilities and at those events. In our perspective, we actually think that the turnout for this type of project was actually fairly good. It hasn't been uncommon in the past that people hear zoning and we might get 1 or 2 people at an open house. So we did see open house events where there was 15, 17 people attending, and we almost had 1,800 hits on our IMO page. So we think it was generally well received. We do recognize that there still are those challenges in notifying people because this is such a large project that applies to the entire town, but we did work closely with Public and Strategic Affairs to really hit the social media channels and get that messaging out there.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, at this time, I'm going to ask my question, and that would be with regards to I have 2 questions. So the first one is with regards to the adjacent neighborhood to the north. I know the mayor had mentioned the wartime homes. Are these homes, these neighborhoods similar as far as what would qualify for heritage destination? Are we going to have someone from that community coming asking the same thing? Is that a possibility?
So to the chair, it would be a possibility. I mean, there are there are some differences when you look at the history of those two neighborhoods. So the neighborhood to the north we call the wartime homes, and they were actually built for the workers of DIL. I think construction began in 1942, whereas neighborhood 1 was a planned community that came slightly after the war years. I would say that each of those communities is historically significant, but for different reasons. If there was a similar desire in the wartime homes area where they wanted to, seek some information about heritage conservation districts, again, we could be open to that.
I'm sorry, what neighborhood came first, did you say?
The wartime homes. So that's to the north of Highway
Yes.
401.
Yeah, I'm familiar with where they are. They used to be part of Ward 2 a long, long time ago. My next question would be with regards to why this has failed before. It was mentioned in Ms. Middleton's presentation that there was an attempt before, or I think through Mr. Jeffries, that it failed. Why did it fail?
I think at that time, the initial concern was similar to what we're hearing today. It was this whole process was spurred by the fact that there was a new home being built that was larger than the existing homes. At that time, I think there was concerns about, as mentioned before, the level of red tape that could be involved with a heritage conservation district. Any tool like that is going to have an impact on homeowners' property rights. But while that impact is there, I think that the town is really responsible for setting the rules in terms of what that heritage conservation district would look like. So the town could create a plan that was very specific. It could create a plan that was a little more open-ended and would allow some kinds of adaptive changes over time. So at that time, I think there was just concern about how that was going to impact the rights of the individual property owners.
Because it could be very limiting on a community. It takes away their freedom to do with what currently exists, and you could be putting so much more limitations on them than what they have now, correct?
It typically adds another layer of review for the town, and that's through the heritage permit process to ensure that what is being proposed conforms to the policy of the district plan. Yes.
And would that be comparison, I know it won't be exactly the same, but will it be a comparison to the limitations that are in Pickering Village?
It's similar. Pickering Village does have a heritage conservation district, so the process would be the same, but the types of developments and the types of changes might look a little different between the two different neighborhoods.
Understood, but still very limiting.
Sure.
So at what percentage would if this was to go through and the consultation takes, there's a process and we have a consultation, you on the staff side with this neighborhood, what percentage of buy-in is needed for this to come to fruition?
So there's no percentage of buy-in required from the neighborhood itself. The buy-in would in fact have to come from council, as council's the authority that would make the decision on whether or not to bring this forward. But under the Heritage Act, there's a requirement that 25% of the properties in the Heritage Conservation District are representative of the attributes that we're looking to protect. So as long as 25% of the properties in that area are the types of homes, the original homes that were built there, it would satisfy the requirements from the province's standpoint.
That's a provincial standpoint. Okay, so just to get this clear in my mindset, if we follow through with this today, if there's any type of amendment comes forward, anything that happens here today, where we as a council are asking you to follow through with some type of consultation with this neighborhood and these folks, and it grows to a certain percentage and there's a certain amount of buy-in on this. If there is an equally stronger set of buy-in against this, and folks are like, no, this is my property, I want the freedom to do what I want with my property, however this is going to be developed. At that point, let's say we do follow through down the line. I'm going step by step here. Down the line, we say, yeah, heritage destination. Can someone come back and come at it? Like, can we be sued for that? Can there be litigation?
Through the chair to the chair, and maybe before, without going all the way down that road, I think it might be best if council decides that this is something that they want staff to look at, that maybe they could direct staff to prepare a report and outline what a process would look like, as opposed to answering those questions that we don't have answers to, because
Okay.
all we're doing is identifying some issues
Okay.
within this neighborhood, and we'd like the ability to report back to council in a more fulsome way that would give council kind of the tools, or at least the steps to know what adventure we're about to embark on.
I would very much
So
appreciate that,
if any
yes.
direction is going to come from council
Yes.
today on the presentation that Ms. Middleton has provided and the questions going back and forth, that would be my recommendation.
I think that would be very much appreciated, get some clarity on that. Thank you so much. I have another follow-up question from Councillor Bauer, and I think there's some motions or amendments coming.
Thank you, Chair Henry. Yes, thank you, Director Romanowski, for clearing that up. When we had this discussion just now and asking for what the neighborhood would like, they're asking for a discussion, further discussion with staff. Staff has now agreed that that is possible, and with a report. So I think that the motion is, I'm not expecting an answer of yes or no, we're doing this. I'm expecting that a conversation will be had and information will be shared so that council can make the best decision in the interest of the neighborhood and Ajax. Just clarifying that. Thank you for letting me back in.
Thank you, and we have a follow-up from Mayor Collier.
Sorry, just not a question, thank you, Chair. Just, I think when this comes forward, why don't we just, maybe Councillor Bauer would like to move this amendment that we add a bullet 3 that directs staff to prepare and report back to council on a report of a potential historic neighborhood after questions from, thank you.
Thank you, much appreciated. Mrs. Middleton, thank you very much for your presentation here today. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming before us. At this time, is there anyone else that has a presentation that is in the gallery now? Okay, do we have anyone online? Yes? If we could proceed with that, thank you.
Mr. Rogers, if you'd like to proceed.
Hello, good afternoon. Jonathan Roger here from Zelinka Priamo in the City of Toronto. We represent Belmont Equity Rosslyn Landing Ajax Limited, the owners of a mixed-use commercial plaza located at 1, 3, 5, and 7 Rosslyn Road East and 901 Harwood Avenue North in Ajax, which includes commercial service, tenants, as well as a daycare. On behalf of Belmont, we submitted comments for the town's zoning bylaw review. Our letter is generally focused on Planning Act changes and the new provincial planning statement that will come into effect on October 20th as they relate to employment areas. Under the new definition, uses that are excluded from employment areas are institutional and commercial, including retail and office not associated with the primary employment use. The provincial planning statement requires that planning authorities assess and update employment areas identified in official plans in order to ensure that the designation is appropriate to the planned function of employment areas. We suggest that the Region of Durham Employment Areas designation and the Town of Ajax Prestige Employment designation will need to be updated to recognize that the Belmont lands that are developed with a mixed-use commercial plaza are not an employment area as defined under the provincial planning statement. In the context of the implementation policies, the provincial planning statement clearly intends that the Belmont lands are a retail plaza where residential intensification is to be directed and not an employment area. Despite the current employment areas and prestige employment designations under the region and town official plans, there's no obligation to update the Town of Ajax zoning bylaw, as the Belmont lands are currently proposed to maintain the existing site-specific PE zone. In the context of a community areas designation under the Region of Durham official plan and a mixed-use commercial corridor designation under the Town of Ajax official plan, they would be appropriate for the Belmont lands. As the town will be completing an official plan review, in order to be consistent with the provincial planning statement, it may be necessary to create new official plan designations for sites such as the Belmont lands where mixed residential commercial uses are appropriate. A general commercial zone or a new corridor mixed residential and commercial zone that would better implement the mixed commercial corridor or a new official plan designation would be consistent with the provincial planning statement, including the policies related to supporting residential intensification through infill development of the vacant portion of the mixed-use commercial plaza on the Belmont lands. Further review with staff as to the existing development on the Belmont lands, the general commercial zone, or a new corridor mixed residential and commercial zone, along with appropriate site-specific permissions and regulations would be required. The new provincial planning statement has policies that speak to the development of underutilized commercial and institutional sites, such as shopping plazas. The provision, sorry, I think they cut out for a second there, I apologize. As such, the provision of residential uses with intensification through infill development on the vacant portion of the Belmont lands is appropriate. We will be following up with planning staff in order to discuss our comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. We have Mayor Collier for the first question.
Thank you, Chair. This is not a question to Mr. Rogers, this is a question to staff. We're dealing today with the comprehensive zoning bylaw update. Would this, Mr. Rogers' concerns not be dealt with through the official plan review that's happening next?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, that's correct. We will be having to look at this through the official plan review, and we do have questions into the province at the moment, just seeking clarification on things like this and how we reconcile our official plan with the region's official plan and the new provincial policy statement. There's a lot of moving pieces right now that need to be investigated further, and certainly that's the process that we would be completing that review.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions on this? Seeing none, I will ask a question. With regards to the official plan review, what is the timeline on that before we're looking at that?
To you, Madam Chair. So I'm hoping that my team can start that project this year. We're just struggling to hire some positions to help us in that process, but we hope to get the terms of reference on the street this year, and then it would be a couple of year process. We're just finalizing the details in terms of how that process will play out.
So for today's purpose and the presentation that we just saw, if the province is coming forth with this and we're playing catch up here, and we have a year to 2 years out, we're not going to have something come back as a bylaw amendment to this comprehensive zoning review? For this particular situation, could be for multiple properties, not just this property.
Yeah, so to you, Madam Chair, this is the way planning works. We're constantly playing catch up and working through the process in terms of updating our documents along the line. This process is actually updating our zoning bylaw from the last official plan review. And as Mr. Rogers identified, we would have further conversations, but in order for us to change the zoning, it has to comply with our official plan as well. So there are other steps that need to take place. And to be honest, there's a lot of unanswered questions that we even have at the moment that we are looking for clarification from the province on. And we're expecting transition rules and guidance documents from them as the new PPS comes into effect.
And that makes sense, because how do we really speak to this when we haven't even seen it ourselves? So we're playing a little catch up here. Thank you so much, Mr. Rogers, for your presentation. I'm seeing no other questions here on my board. Thank you for coming before us today, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, I don't believe we have any members in attendance. Is that correct? To the clerks, I will ask that question.
Nobody further registered.
Excellent. Okay, so at this time, that concludes today's public meeting process. And now I'm going to read the resolution. And after the resolution, we will go into comments, questions, or amendments. So, that the report dated October 7th, 2024, entitled Zoning for Our Future, Town of Ajax Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw Review, Statutory Public and Consultation Update, be received for information, and 2, that staff be directed to review comments and prepare a final proposed zoning bylaw amendments with an overview of the changes resulting from the public and stakeholder consultation process for consideration at future meetings of Community Affairs and Planning Committee. And at this time, this has been moved by Councillor Sterling Lee and seconded by Councillor Lisa Bauer. So we will move into any portion if we have any questions at this time. And we do. So Mayor Collier, if you will proceed.
Thank you, Chair. And I didn't, and I just thought one up. So I wanted to talk about the agricultural, so let me find it here. I did see that gas stations and will be looked at further through the OP review. So to do with controlled, they call it controlled environment agricultural facility. So stacked greenhouses, indoor growing, whatever you want to call it. We dealt with one of these in South Ajax, and I'm sure Councillor Bauer can probably remember this, across from Giant Tiger in that area, and the smell that comes off these things is really something else. And it's gone now, thankfully, and that one was put in because the federal government just gave a certificate and actually never even checked with us. So that's been dealt with, but I think I have an issue with having these in our prestige employment for a couple of reasons. One, I mean, agriculture gets, is it a 75% tax reduction for farming on their property taxes?
So through the chair, Mayor Collier, there is a deduction. They do pay the proportion of the building that is growing crops would be eligible for a reduced tax rate. That's correct.
That was 75%.
Offhand, I don't know the exact number, but yes.
I do. It's significant. We, as of the Watson's report that I think was last done in 2019, have a finite amount of employment lands. And that report says we do have enough to last it through till whatever the next time is, but only because they changed the variable to make the number work. We don't have enough employment lands to get us where we need to be. I do have a problem having a use that can be easily accommodated in all of the green space that we have. Agricultural use, indoor grow ops, although they might have to put in the infrastructure, water, sewer, electrical, gas, whatever is needed for these into the Greenbelt potentially, which we did with the Audley Rec Center. It can be done. Can easily go there and supplement our tax revenues and DCs and employment where we don't have them right now, rather than taking up space in our prestige employment in our employment zones. I think at the appropriate time, I'm gonna move that be taken out and not be a permitted use. So I want to hear what my colleagues have to say also. And I assume, Councillor Bauer, you're gonna bring the motion for a bullet number 3 to, okay, I'll be happy to second that if you like. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair Henry. Thank you for the report. Very interesting. Lots of good discussions today. So I just, on actually the page 2 of the report, so for page 5 of the agenda, so the paragraph right before section 2.0 where it just says, it is also an opportunity for council to identify any matters that they may have heard from constituents during the consultation period and provide direction to staff prior to preparation of the final proposed zoning bylaw. So, and I noticed that a couple of the things that residents have brought to me have been included as general comments or comments in the report. For example, monster homes. So I'm glad to see that, you know, that's noted. The other one is there's lots of residents in Ward 3 who have come with great concerns about zoning to allow a public gun range. I don't know if that came up during these discussions, and if there is any comment that you can make regarding that now. And then the other comment was about the feeling, and you did mention this in your general comments report, the feeling that a lot of these decisions, general feeling from residents that decisions have already been made, which deters participation in the planning process. So, and that's on page 5 of the report, page 8 of the agenda. So I just would like to ask if you would like to comment on sort of how you are responding to a lot of these comments. Is there going to be any action or changes as a result of this input, et cetera? Just your thoughts, please, Mr. McCullough.
So through the chair to Councillor Bauer, so a couple of great questions there. So the first one I'll hit on was the gun range. So this is one that actually just came up for the first time in the context of this project on Friday. So just to be clear, none of the changes that we're proposing through this process would permit the gun range. That's going to be considered through a separate zoning bylaw amendment. There will be separate meetings and a separate decision by council. So in terms of, if hopefully that satisfies the community and council's concerns in relation to that, we're not taking any action on that item. In terms of the feeling that decisions have already been made. And really, we've structured this process and even this meeting today to receive the feedback, to hear direction from council, things that you'd like us to look further at, and really dig into where concerns have been coming up. This process has been going on for a number of years, but it did drop off for a number of years as well. And so we did lose a lot of that momentum. And part of this is rebuilding that momentum and proposing and listening to the changes. And that's why we'll be going through in detail everything that we heard and making recommendations where we believe that they are appropriate. And we would bring that bylaw back to council for recommendation. I think that answers the question.
It does. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's my question right now. Thank you, Chair Henry.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from council?
Oh, I'm sorry. Here, leave. I'm glad you left the mic on. I do have some amendments, please, that I would like to introduce. So,
Sorry, just clarification, because I just wanted to ask some questions with regards to short-term rentals.
got it. I can wait until you.
Pardon? Yeah. If you wouldn't mind, I'll just ask a few questions and then we'll move into
I'm happy
amendments.
to wait until you instruct. Thank you.
So I just wanted to verify, and we've had some offline discussions, and this goes over to the planning team, whoever would like to answer that. With regards now, we have no clarification currently between a short-term rental and a B&B, and what that is, correct, from staff?
To you, Madam Chair, so that's correct. Currently, a short-term rental would fall under our bed and breakfast establishment definition due to the lack of another separate definition for that process. So currently, that's what it's been considered as.
And if we were to, and I am bringing forth an amendment, so there's not if, when I bring forth my amendment with regards to this and ask for some more clarification in the future, we can then look at the possibility of, we would gain information on exactly how many are within the town, correct, at that point in time?
So to you, Madam Chair, I'm uncertain of the question because at the moment we have been roughly tracking the number of Airbnbs in the one of the discussion papers, the technical discussion paper. It did identify that I think in 2023 there was approximately 100. I can't remember the exact number off my head. So we have been tracking that, and the region has actually been starting a process to track the number of Airbnbs that are in town. So that has been something that has been underway, and it was a recommendation in our housing strategy as well.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so clarification on that. How, I was unaware that the region is tracking it. How are they tracking it? I'm just curious before I move forward with this.
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure how they're looking at that information. I know that periodically they're looking month over month and looking at the number of listings that are appearing on various short-term rental websites, VRBO, Airbnb, things like that.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that information. So I will open it back up, the floor, to amendments, and I'm seeing that Councillor Bauer, you'd like to start.
Thank you very much, Chair. So bullet number 3, thank you, Mayor Collier, for seconding, would be that staff be directed to report to council on the required steps, including community consultation, to implement a heritage conservation district for Neighborhood 1 for consideration at a future meeting at the Community Affairs and Planning Committee. Thank you to staff for helping put the wording together on this. So and I'll just speak to it. We do spend a lot of time, and we are very proud to spend that time talking about the history of Ajax, where we came from, where we are, where we want to go. And I'm very thankful to have residents. I've only been in Ajax for 25 years. That's not long enough. So I'm very happy to hear from my ward constituents, my neighbors, residents of Ajax, who have that history and are certainly willing to share it and be great storytellers. We need that, right? That's how you keep something alive, is by telling the stories. So this is a conversation. I'm very interested to find out what happened in 2010 and what will happen now. That's 14 years, that's a long time. So this motion just gives the direction so that we can have this conversation and see what is appropriate for today. So I didn't know that the neighborhood I live in was the first one planned in all of Canada. I knew it was for Ajax. I didn't know it was for Canada. So shout out to Neighborhood 1. So that is my motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. We will move forward on voting, correct?
Excuse me, Chair, I also have, do we add all the amendments now and then vote all together? One at a time.
One at a time.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, I would recommend asking if any other members of council had questions on the amendment before opening the vote.
Excellent. Do we have any other questions?
Thank you, Chair. Would this apply for all future neighborhoods? Let's say neighborhood 2 wants it. The conversations that we're having, the groundwork that we're setting, can it be applied for any neighborhood in the future that may want this designation? Or would each conversation have to happen with the neighborhood individually?
So through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee, the same process would apply in the future to any other interested neighborhoods, and that has always been the process. When heritage conservation is being considered, it's always done on a case-by-case basis, specific to the area being considered.
And there's no minimum required? Like there's no minimum number of residents required to trigger this?
No. So as I mentioned before, the Ontario Heritage Act doesn't require the residents to approve it or anything. It's entirely left up to council on making the decision on whether to move forward with a heritage conservation district.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, not seeing any, I'm just going to ask one final question to the amendment. I'm assuming that when the amendment comes forth and the planning side reaches out to this area, that it will be the entire area, not just the folks that came here today, correct? The full neighborhood.
Through the chair to the chair, it'll be all of Neighborhood 1.
Excellent.
Which is what was directed to us through this motion.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So if we can just call a vote? And that passes. And Councillor Bauer, you had another amendment to bring forward at this time?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So the other amendment is regarding our dear beloved business, for example, Bean and Basket. So let me, home-based home-based business amendment, so I guess bullet number 4. That staff be directed to permit the use of accessory buildings for food pickup or takeout services operating out of a home-based business, and identify any other mitigation measures to minimize impacts on surrounding properties, and to bring an overview of the changes for consideration at a future meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee. Thank you again to staff for helping put those words together. And if we remember, and I don't have a seconder at this point.
Councillor Crawford will second for you.
So if, I'll just speak very briefly, we all remember what happened to, in the wartime neighborhood for that business that had been operating for a number of years. And it really brought, it was a great reminder that things happen, troubles happen, but discussions can happen after the fact, or solutions can be found. And all it takes is a little communication and collaboration. So I think this will help, for this business and any others. So I ask for your support.
Thank you. Questions? We have Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. This one's a bit of a pedantic one, but that staff be directed to permit the use. So wouldn't that imply that we are now deciding that now under permission? Like, wouldn't it be to examine the use of accessory buildings? If we permit it now, we are allowing it. Am I incorrect in assuming that?
So through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee, it would just be directing staff to make the update. It wouldn't be permitted right away because we still have to go back and update the bylaw and bring the final bylaw back to council. So it'd be directing staff to make that change in the final bylaw.
But we're not even, this would not facilitate a report going over the pros and cons then, right? You would automatically be updating the bylaw then.
That's correct.
So I'm less comfortable with that. I would very much want to see a report from staff giving us why we can't do it or why we should do it or the implications. Like, I understand, the future meeting of CAP and overview of the changes for consideration, but if we're permitting it now, that's without any sort of oversight or any sort of information given to us. So I wouldn't be able to support that as is unless staff have.
Just thinking out loud, and through the chair to Councillor Lee, maybe it says that staff be directed to include, I can't see it all here because our heads are blocking it. Something along the lines that staff be directed to include pickup food, takeout services as a permitted use. So it's not permitting it, but it's allowing for council when we come back to consider it as a use. So we can add it as a use for your consideration. We can do the evaluation.
And then you'll show us
and then we'll report back as per our report, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if I may jump in, actually, that's through you, Madam Chair, to Regional Councillor Lee. We do intend to report back to council on all the comments we heard, what our responses are and everything, and looking at the motion again as it's written. It's just changes for consideration at a future meeting, so we can, in our reporting back on everything we heard and what our recommendations are moving forward, we can do that.
So to the mover and seconder, would you be okay with the change of language? I'm fine with that. Clerk. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The clerk will work on that change of language. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll call this to vote. And that passes. So, do we have any other amendments before I bring mine forward? Mayor Collier, was there? Oh, sorry, Councillor Bauer. I'll wait for, there we go.
Thank you, Chair Henry. And this one, we talked a lot about monster homes, and I'm not specifically speaking about Neighborhood 1. I'm talking about, there's Lewin Crescent that has come forward. There's other areas in Ward 3 and in Ajax where they talk about the height. So I would like to put forth this amendment, which is regarding the peak measurement, PEAK. That staff be directed to amend the definition of height to measure the height of homes from the peak of the house instead of the midpoint of a peaked roof, and to bring an overview of the changes for consideration at a future meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee. Thank you very much to staff for putting those words together and giving me a little bit of discussion for a little bit of wiggle room on the heights of some of these homes. So that could potentially save, decrease the height, save a couple of meters off how tall a monster home could be because of where the peak is being measured. So that is the request. I do not have a seconder at this time. So,
Okay, so Councillor Dyes has acknowledged that she will be seconding this motion. And do we have any questions? We have questions. One moment. Mayor
Me?
Collier?
Thank you, Chair. Just to staff, my understanding is the 11 meter is to the midpoint of a roof, and that is pretty much the standard for the entire province of Ontario. Is that true?
Through the chair to the mayor. It's not a provincial standard. I would say traditionally it's kind of the two-story homes are usually around 11 meters to the midpoint of the roof. Could be 9 meters, could be 10 meters. In some cases, it does go to 12 or 13, depending on the municipality you're in. 11's kind of the average range that you would see in a zoning bylaw typically for two-story single detached homes.
Okay, so what's being proposed is something that's kind of unique and different and very, very, very site-specific for one particular neighborhood and one particular municipality of the 444 municipalities in the province.
Based on the discussion we're having, that, yes, it would appear that it's towards one neighborhood, but we could look at it overall through this process.
And if somebody in one of those neighborhoods, if that did pass and was implemented, wanted to build a 13-meter high roof, they could just go to Committee of Adjustment and get a minor variance.
Through the chair to the mayor, yes, they could go through the Committee of Adjustment to alter any of the performance standards in any of this zoning bylaw, future zoning bylaw. That's correct.
Okay, I'm fine looking at, we represent the whole town. No disrespect to neighborhood 1, but we represent the whole town. And this isn't even the real historically relevant DIL neighborhood, which is north of the 401. I don't do knee-jerk politics and making up things on the fly. No disrespect to anybody, but I mean, this is a broad bylaw for all of the town of Ajax. We all need to treat everybody the same. We can't be making exceptions, because the second we make an exception in one, everybody else is going to be asking for the same exception, whether it be for parking, whether it be for anything. I'm happy to look at a potential heritage district for this, but I can't do one-off neighborhood by neighborhood amendments, so I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Before I open the floor to Councillor Bauer, I just, point of clarification on what the mayor just asked. If this was allowed for one particular neighborhood, would that not already be included in the portion of a heritage destination if it was to come forth? Would that part of the peak issue not already be included?
So through you to you, Madam Chair. So there are two different issues. What the motion says is just dealing with the definition of height in the zoning bylaw, and that would apply town-wide. So what's being proposed is it's looking at town-wide, and in terms of what could be permitted in the Heritage Conservation District, it's premature at this time to say what that would look like, because that's a process that would play out separately and, in consultation with that community and looking at what the attributes are of the community, developing that plan. So they're two separate things. What Councillor Bauer is looking to propose is we have different ways of measuring height in the zoning bylaw for different types of houses. So for a flat roof, it's to the top of the flat roof, and then for a pitched roof, it's measured to the midpoint. So this motion is just looking at potentially re-identifying where that position is so that you wouldn't end up with homes that are higher than 11 meters. It would just limit them, and that becomes the ultimate cap. Now, it's not to say that it's not going to eliminate the potential for larger homes that are within that community, but it's something that she's looking at could, I guess, mitigate some of the potential impacts of a much taller house.
For the entire town?
That's correct.
Oh my. All right, I'm going to open the floor back up to Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair Henry. So yes, this is not just for Neighborhood 1 or for Woodhouse Crescent. This is for the entire town. It does happen that perhaps Ward 3 or South Ajax, I would also argue Ward 1, where, the older homes, smaller homes with larger lots, that's where they all are. So when new builds happen, that's where they happen. So, and I will say it's not just Neighborhood 1, it's lots of different streets and residents that have come and said, these houses don't fit the character, I forget the phrase that we use, but the nature and character of the neighborhood, because they're just so tall. So if a new method of measurement, if we can put that in our bylaw, allows for builders to come in and build their homes, but maybe shaves off a meter or two because we're measuring from a different perspective, I don't see why that is prejudice to one neighborhood. I do take a little bit of disrespect. I do feel a little disrespect, Mayor Collier, when you said something about it's not all about Neighborhood 1. It's not the oldest neighborhood. Never said it was, but it was the first planned neighborhood in Canada, so that's different. That's what makes it special. So anyway, that's what this is about. Ajax, we love to have solutions, the Ajax solution, right? We talk about coming up with things that are unique to our town, and we make exceptions for many different things. The amendments that come forward, zoning amendments, official plan amendments, we talk about making exceptions for different areas in the town. So this is town-wide. That's why I'm proposing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Opening the floor up to Councillor Dyes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to staff, I just have a question about height. If, say, a single property or residential property was torn down, what height can they build to now?
So through the chair to Regional Councillor Dyes. So right now, the way that the bylaw is written, the maximum height is 11 meters. And depending on the style of house that they want to construct, if it's a flat roof, it would be to the top of that flat roof. If it is a mansard roof, it's to the top of that mansard roof. And then it's only in situations where if it's a pitched roof that it's measured to the midpoint in that situation. Now I will highlight something that there are other communities that do measure to the very top, and heights generally vary from about 9 or 10 meters up to almost 12.5 meters. So there is variation in heights across the province and where people are measuring them. So what this is just doing is it's looking at potentially limiting the height so that you wouldn't get above 11 meters, because we were looking at it on average, depending on what that pitched roof looks like, you could get a 12 or 13 meter height, and it's just serving to have that much taller roof. Historically, I think that it was measured this way because of larger estate lots, just to get the proportions right of some of these houses. And as we've intensified and had more lots, those have become less and less common, I would say.
So let's go back a step, because we look at houses like a 1-story, 2-story, 3-story house. So what would that 11-meter height get you in stories?
So 11 height, if you're doing a flat roof, you could potentially end up with a 3-story dwelling, and that's permitted in the low density residential designation.
Right.
And that's the reason why it's been identified that. And as we start promoting some of these additional units and things like that, those types of steps will become important in terms of looking at options and designs of houses. And the unfortunate thing is modern homes are somewhat different than the ones we've seen historically. For various reasons, but you could get 3 stories in 11 meters.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open the floor up to Regional Councillor Crawford. Well, I'll
Thank you,
try.
Madam Chair. I know we had a situation on Christina, I think it was back in 2018 or 19. I don't think that street is designated heritage at all, right? But it has a very unique design throughout the whole street. And somebody bought a lot and adjusted the frontage and the height and the design, and it really was quite disturbing to many people. We ended up taking it all the way to the region land division committee, I think it was at that time. So I will support this amendment. Oh man, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I hate getting old. I had a really good thought too. Maybe it'll come back to me eventually, but I will support this because, as you so well put, a part of my area is the Pickering Village, the original Pickering Village, and very, very large lots with very tiny houses on them, and could happen, and has happened in some situations where they come out of character. I know what I was going to say. I saw the house on Lewin being built. I don't know if it was on Lewin or behind Lewin or whatever, but it was shocking actually how out of character it was to the neighborhood, and how close it came to some of the fencing of the backyards of some people. So I know it's allowed. I know you're allowed to do it. It's just it's hard to deal with it when you're part of a neighborhood that you've been in for such a long time, and you could be very much impacted by somebody building so close to your backyard, right? So anyway, call it whatever you want, but I will support this because I believe that we do have some neighborhoods where this will be very impactful if it happens more in the future.
Thank you. Mayor Collier, I'm going to let you back in. You have some comments, sir?
I'll just, yeah.
Sorry, we're going to go to Councillor Lee first.
Yeah, can I move to defer to our council meeting on October 21st? Yeah, only reason is I think this is a pretty significant bylaw change that we seem to be making without any sort of consultation. I don't know what the long-term repercussions of this are, and I'm very uncomfortable deciding based on the 5 minutes we have asking these questions. So if I would like to move to defer to the council meeting, and I need a seconder.
Okay, Mayor Collier wants back in.
Just under the new procedural bylaw, I think I can speak to a deferral motion, which I support and second. I agree, and I think we're getting a little bit off track here. Like, we don't own neighboring properties, people. Your neighbors can do whatever the heck they want to their property, whether it's commercial, residential, whichever. You have no say as to what your neighbor does with their property. That is their fundamental right. So I think it's unrealistic to think that we can, limit people's rights on what they want to do with their property, especially in houses that are they going on 60 plus, close to 70 years old now, some of them? I mean, they're eventually going to need to be torn down and rebuilt. And that is just sort of the natural way things work. So I just don't want us to forget that. Like, we are getting a little bit dangerous here in stepping on people's rights of their ownership of their homes. Just want people to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have we do. I will let you respond, and then we're going to close this portion down. So yes.
Thank you, Chair Henry. I know it's not directed at me, but I do have a response for it. And the response is that currently there is a bylaw that limits the height. So we're not creating something new. We're just changing it. We're tweaking it. And that is our job as Ajax Council. Comment ended. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So, Bazinga, yeah. I can honestly say on my 2 years of council, I have never been so confused in my life as I am right now. So I'm just going to call the vote. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. That passes. I will now let Mayor Collier in with an amendment.
Thank you, Chair. As I spoke to earlier about the environmental agricultural facilities and cannabis production facilities, I'll need a seconder. The staff be directed to remove controlled environmental agricultural facilities and cannabis production facilities as a permitted use in prestige employment with an overview of the change brought forward for consideration at a future meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee.
Thank you. I'm going to open the floor.
Sorry,
We have a seconder.
Sorry,
Councillor
Chair
Lee?
Henry, if I can
Yes.
jump in just really quickly.
Yes.
It's also permitted in the GE zone as well. So just clarification, if that was something you were looking to remove it from all employment zones, that may be something you want to update.
I would just like clarification on this motion, or on this amendment. If this comes forward, we're saying that nothing from Taunton South, correct? Is that the simplified way of saying this?
Anything that's blue in our official plan.
I believe that was in my original wording that I had sent. So yeah, take out prestige and just put in employment zones. That's fine, thank you.
Which would mean nothing south of Taunton Road.
To Madam Chair, generally, yes. So our employment zones are the ones that are blue on our zoning bylaw, our official plan map. So that's where it would be, which is south of Taunton, basically.
Thank you. Excellent. Questions, concerns, and west of Audley. Excellent. Questions, concerns, fellow council members? Seeing none, let's go into a vote, please. That passed. Okay, so colleagues, any other amendments before I bring mine? Seeing none. Excellent. So I have an amendment that I've worked out the language of staff. I'm looking for a seconder on this as regards short-term rental amendment. That staff be directed to define a short-term rental, STR, in the final zoning bylaw amendments, that STRs be listed as a permitted use in the urban area residential zone, and that staff update the definition of a bed and breakfast establishment to make clear the separation in these two uses, with an overview of the changes brought forth for consideration at future meetings of the Committee of Affairs and Planning Committee.
Through you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I would recommend at this time that you ask another individual to act as chair, as the chair
Excellent.
cannot move a motion.
I will bring Councillor Lee over here. I will gladly switch places. And we're back. Apparently I can stay in the chair and do this. Yay me. So if we can get clerks to put that up, please, on the screen for all to see. Excellent. So moved by Councillor Henry. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Lee? Councillor Crawford is my seconder. And now I'm going to open up to questions, concerns, comments. Mayor Collier, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just questions to staff, just reading this. So short-term rentals and final zoning bylaw amendments, I agree that we need to have a definition. I don't agree that we have to necessarily list it as a permitted use, but I want to ask, and maybe through to Ms. Cruciano, about the new housing not housing tax, what do we call it? The
You want this?
The municipal, through the chair to the mayor, the municipal accommodation tax.
municipal accommodation tax, which would apply to hotels, that would also apply to short-term rentals, Airbnbs?
Through the chair to the mayor, their staff's intention is to bring forth a report to council that will outline recommendations surrounding that, but it is applicable to short-term rentals.
Okay. Is this wording required if we were to decide, and I think this is coming to our next GGC next Tuesday?
Yes.
Which would be approved by council on October 21st. Would this wording be required and this definition be required in the zoning bylaw to allow us to collect that housing tax?
Through the chair to the mayor, staff are seeking a legal opinion to clarify. We aren't entirely, staff don't believe we do need a definition to implement the MAT tax. However, we are seeking a legal opinion just to be on the safe side to see if it is necessary. The requirement for a definition in the zoning bylaw is just for a variety of other housekeeping initiatives between planning and development services.
Okay, I wonder, could the clerk just scroll this up a little bit? I can't see because of the windows with the speakers. Make clear the separation of these two uses. We currently have bed and breakfast defined and a permitted use. Is that correct? Okay.
Sorry, Mayor Collier, sorry. Apologies. Before proceeding with this, I just want to get clarification from staff that the few points that were noted that were given to me do not have to appear in the amendment, correct? Could I just get?
Through the chair to Councilor Henry, yes, if you're referring to the bullet points in the notes from staff, then yes, those do not need to be included.
Excellent. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure my colleagues were aware if there was missing any information before we proceed in discussion. Go ahead, Mayor Collier.
Thank you. Is our short-term rentals currently a permitted use?
So to you, Mr. Chair, so our definition for bed and breakfast establishment is so broad that we consider them to be short-term rentals.
Okay, so just to let's narrow that down a little bit, because I don't know that we want short-term rentals. I agree with defining so we can narrow that scope. And don't get me wrong, my experience has not been, we've had a lot of issues with short-term rentals. I don't know that we have very many. Where my issues have been in areas mostly where a landlord is absent, living in Toronto, and one of their kids who's early 20s with a bunch of their other 21-year-old buddies live in a house in the neighborhood and cause havoc, which wouldn't be covered under this. So is this a problem that we have right now, short-term rentals? Is this something we need to address, or are we just doing this to sort of check the box?
So to you, so through the chair to Mr. Mayor, so there's a couple of things here. Currently, if we were to define short-term rentals but not permitted as a use anywhere, any landowner would have to go through the full zoning bylaw amendment process to permit that use and consider it on their property, which to some could be onerous, could be difficult. We have identified in our discussion paper that in staff's view, short-term rentals haven't been an issue from a housing standpoint. It represents approximately 0.15% of our housing units. So we've never viewed it as an issue on that. And that's not to say that that won't happen in the future. And Bylaw Services in the past has identified that they've got the tools needed to deal with those issues should problems arise. Now, if there was a desire to, collect tax in the future and to control some of these, a licensing bylaw could be the tool that might be needed to deal with that. But at this time, it's also been recommended not to move forward with that just due to the resources that would be required to implement such a program based on such a small number of short-term rentals that we have.
Okay. I'm just thinking out loud here. I'm fine with the definitions, because I think that's important to be able to give us some sort of teeth if this becomes an issue. But adding it as a permitted use right now, if we didn't do that today, is that something we could do later if we were to go ahead with this housing tax for short-term or hotel or whatever we call it? Or would we have to go through this full review again to add it?
Yes, there's two things there. So if you were to define the use but not permitted in any zones, you are essentially not permitting it as a permitted use in the town. And to allow it, you would have to go through the full zoning bylaw amendment. It could be a standalone amendment, but it would go through the full zoning bylaw amendment process to make that change.
Is that not something we can do as a directive at a later date if we decide we need it?
Yes.
I think we can.
Yes, because it's yes, because it's housing. Can we get an answer on that?
Well, you're not going to get an answer right now because we're not the experts on that specifically. However, I think what we need to understand is that this is the public meeting for it. If staff are going to bring it back as whether permitted use or not, we can evaluate that through our recommendation report that we'll be providing to council on the final zoning bylaw. So like all the other directives or like all the other motions that were brought forward, we can take these comments into consideration and bring that forward, and council can make that decision at the time in the future when we're presenting the full zoning bylaw for council's consideration.
So would the mover and seconder be open to just removing the word as a permitted use in urban area residential zones, and let staff go back and then come back to us at the future meeting with what this is going to mean and whether we need it or not, and we can add it in at that point?
Oh,
And I can
yes.
support this.
Most certainly.
Okay.
Thank
Fine.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lee.
Thank you. The mayor captured a lot of my points. I don't think it should be permitted at all. I think we keep hearing that it's 0.1% or whatever, but it's still about 100 units. Last time I checked, 3 people, that could be about 300 people we could put in permanent rental housing or whatever they want to do with it. I think right now, people who are using Airbnb are taking advantage of the municipality by having something that we collect nothing on, don't regulate, but have to deal with the repercussions. Councillor Henry and I do deal with a lot of complaints, partying, loud noises, and in the worst case scenario, gunshots. And it's the landlord or the owners of these STRs just put their hands up saying, oh, it's not my responsibility. You know, I did this through Airbnb. So I think, you know, in lieu of a housing shortage, we should be banning them altogether. I know it's a very bold thing. And I think if you truly want to use it, then set up an Airbnb or a B&B and do it properly. But skirting around the municipal rules is not the intent of this. So I won't belabor this. I won't alter it because I think there is an avenue to possibly look at this. But yeah, I wouldn't be okay with in urban areas. I think that we should be deciding as a council that STR is not the direction we want to go. But we'll decide that at a later date. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I concur with everything you said. Do we have any other questions or concerns? All right, seeing none, I will call that to vote with the amendment made there. And wonderfully, that passes unanimously. Thank you. So at this time, we have no further presentations or reports at this time. And I'm going to now, we have to move to, oh, we have to move it as amended. I apologize. We have to move as amended, so we need to vote again. All right, thank you, everyone. And so I guess at this time, we will be adjourning the meeting. That the October 7th meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee be adjourned, and that is moved by Councillor Lee, Councillor Bauer, and second by Councillor Lee. Thank you, everyone. Vote, sorry.